Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
Hey, my little biscuit.
Hey, Puddin'.
Okay, we had to read together this amazing set of books, and I constantly say it's some of my favorite Voyager books of all time. 2 books by Christie Golden, Homecoming and
The Farther Shore.
So parts 1 and 2. If you get one, you have to get the other.
Yeah, they're a duology, so
and
they're part of the Voyager relaunch. They take place after the series ended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the key point. I mean, any of us who are Voyager fans, I know from myself, I was frustrated at the last episode of Voyager. I'm not going to say it was bad. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't satisfying. It didn't answer the questions that I was asking all along that I was hoping to be resolved, and these books do that. So, once you watch Endgame, you have to read these books. Actually, let's talk about the back of the first book, Homecoming.
After 7 long years in the Delta Quadrant, the crew of the starship Voyager now confront the strangest world of all, home. For Admiral Catherine Janeway and her stalwart officers, Voyager's miraculous return brings new honors and responsibilities, reunions with long-lost loved ones, and for some, such as the Doctor and 7 of 9, the challenge of forging new lives in a federation that seems to hold little place for them. But even as Janeway and the others go their separate ways, pursuing new adventures and opportunities, a mysterious cybernetic plague strikes Earth, transforming innocent men, women, and children into an entirely new generation of Borg. Now the entire planet faces assimilation, and Voyager may be to blame.
Right off the bat, I gotta say it's a Christie Golden book, so that caught my attention because I read all the numbered Voyager books up until this time, and plus the 2 Jerry Taylor books. And I consider people who don't like to read Star Trek books in general, you have to read the Jerry Taylor books, Pathways and Mosaic, if you're a Voyager fan. I'm gonna add to that list and say there are other 2 more must-reads, and it's going to be these ones that we talk about. Christie Golden knows her Star Trek. She understands the voices of the characters, and to me that's extremely important, that when I'm reading a Star Trek book, that the author understands the voice patterns of particular characters. And throughout both of these books, she hit the nail on the head.
I think she did. Now the thing is, for me, I grew up reading Star Trek books, but I never read a lot of Voyager books. And so these are my first books by Christie Golden. So, I mean, and I really liked them. I think she did do a good job. And I know Voyager is her specialty, writing the Voyager novels. And these books were very enjoyable.
What I love about her, I got a chance to talk to her at DragonCon some years, is that she is a super fan. She's not just an author who has some ideas and then fills in the blanks with Star Trek characters. She understands Star Trek deeply. And I think that's so necessary for books of this caliber, especially something that's going to launch the post-Voyager series.
And because this book, I mean, this is the first time we get to see these characters, on Earth after their journey to the Delta Quadrant. Now they really are home. It's not an illusion, or it's not just sending messages to home. They're actually there. So now we find out, how do they interact with their loved ones now?
These are the questions that I wanted to know about all these years watching Voyager. Exactly.
And so, well, of course, now first of all, Harry Kim does get the long-awaited promotion.
We've been waiting for that.
Yes, and as the book said, because the book already put on the back, Admiral Janeway, so she got promoted to Admiral. It was very interesting. So the Doctor, he had already written a book that he knew was popular, but he was expecting more of a fan following on Earth, and he didn't get it. And then you have 7 of 9, who did seem to be very popular on Earth. People were wanted to crowd around her and talk to her and everything, and she's a a little reticent. She's shy about things like that. So, very ironic the two characters got the opposite of what they wanted.
Well, those are some of the questions that I was asking myself that I thought would be clarified during Endgame. When they return to Earth, what is the reception that they're going to get? How is Harry Kim going to get back into his life? How would 7 of 9 be viewed? I mean, this is a Borg. Granted, she's changed, but what would the public response be? I mean, the whole series of events because we've been following this show for years, caring about these characters for years, but we never got the earthbound viewpoint of them. And that's what I love about these books so much. It's more of a human story, or in the case of the Doctor, a photon story, but it really has a lot of heart, and it goes through the journey of each character working their way back into society.
And so we have Janeway meeting back up with her ex-fiancé, Mark. And the thing is...
How awkward was that?
Yeah, well, she already knew that he was remarried, so it wasn't a surprise. But she met Mark's wife, and they turned out to be friends, which I like. They got along. Yeah, because it doesn't make sense that Janeway would carry a grudge or anything. It wasn't, it wasn't the other person's fault. It wasn't really Mark's fault that Janeway had to be away for 7 years. So it's just what happens.
But I think that she carried herself well there, in that she was just reasonable, that people are going to move on with their lives if they think you're dead.
Exactly. And the big thing was B'Elanna, because she got a message from one of her mother's friends, and then she decides to go off to Boreth, where her mother had disappeared doing the Challenge of Spirit. So B'Elanna gets to go to one of the worlds of her mother, a Klingon world.
A little bit awkward for Tom. Like, he was super supportive, but that wasn't his first choice.
And they have a baby, and so she had to leave her baby. Yeah, I thought it was a good, another good thing to add to the story. Nothing to do with the rest of the story, really. But B'Elanna has her own journey, and she gets to have her Klingon journey, whereas the others are basically having a human journey.
What about Harry Kim's girlfriend? I didn't see this coming at all.
Yes, and I like that too, how the book had, it had his girlfriend Libby as one of the main characters. I do like how the book kind of focused on some of the other characters too. This book had a lot of characters to juggle around, but Libby was good, so she was working for Starfleet Intelligence, and Harry couldn't know that. And Libby was kind of interested in getting back with Harry, but not really. But then her superior wanted her to get back in with Harry because, well, basically to use him to get information.
I felt so bad at the beginning of this book, reading about this, because I was like, man, Harry can't catch a break.
Yeah, it's another tough situation, but she really did like him. It's just that maybe she wasn't sure if they could actually have a future together, but she did like him.
Now, one thing that I was glad that they addressed, because they did smooth it over too much in the series, is the Marquis. In the series, there was some tension at the beginning, and then everybody became friends along the ship. Wasn't thrilled with that. I would have liked it better if there still was different alliances throughout the show. But landing on Earth, we're wondering what would happen with the view of the Marquis, and what happened?
Well, Chakotay ran into one of his old friends, and then Chakotay took Janeway to see a Marquis memorial. And that was a very touching scene. Yeah, that was emotional. And that was so great that Christie Golden put that in. She actually thought of that and put that scene in the book. It was wonderful. So Chakotay got to mourn his friends that were in the Marquis because he had fought with them, worked with them.
And any actions against the Marquis returning to Earth, because of the fact that they did work with the Voyager crew and they did thwart the Borg, it was any actions would be pushed aside. They were starting on a clean slate. And I thought that was good.
Yeah, Starfleet decided to do that. So, yeah.
I thought it made sense.
Well, especially, I mean, looking at like Chakotay and B'Elanna Torres, they've done so much for Voyager to help them. And they performed their duties. You know, they did everything they were supposed to do, even above and beyond. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they deserved it.
Tuvok?
And Tuvok becoming an instructor at the Academy.
Totally made sense to me. It fits his character.
It does. He was kind of like a counselor on Voyager. People came to him for advice. And he is good at explaining things, I think. So he made a good instructor. Now the thing is we know in the books later on he becomes a member of the USS Titan under Captain Riker. But
I love those Titan books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, for some reason he'll decide to leave the Academy, but it is great, you know, at this time that he becomes an instructor. So and at this time he's doing what he wants to do.
But the imminent threat is this cybernetic virus.
And Janeway's ex-fiancé Mark and his new wife have a baby, and their baby contracts the virus.
That was so horrible. I hate to see kids get anything wrong with them.
Yeah, and I think they said in this, I think, that kids are more susceptible to it. So it was one of those things which, and all of this is continued into the next book, but that's one of the things that
there's so many characters here, there's so many plot lines that it needs to be multiple volumes.
Yeah.
I was glad.
The other thing about this was the hologram thing, because, so this person, his name is Oliver Baines, he's a real human being, but he's the one that oversees the Mark I holograms that are on that mining colony, which they showed part of it on Voyager at one time.
Mm-hmm. Good episode.
So now Oliver Baines wants to stage a holographic rebellion, and he goes to see, you know, the doctor from Voyager, the EMH, and I mean the doctor does not like the idea, but then the guy Baines goes through with it anyway, and the doctor gets accused of encouraging him, and so the doctor gets in trouble, but. And this was neat that we find out how all the stuff that's actually run by holograms on Earth at this time. In restaurants, most of the servers are holograms, and they said people who run the transporters are holograms. And all of those things just stop working because the holograms decide to go on strike.
Photons be free!
And it puts the humans in a terrible situation where they can't do the things that they're used to doing. Now for me, I kind of thought, I really didn't want to see a holographic rebellion because I think Voyager has already done so many episodes about the rights of holograms. Mm-hmm. That was one thing I didn't feel they needed to cover again in the books. Mm-hmm. But,
that's one of the things, even all that era of Voyager, about that, I wasn't thrilled with it. I don't really feel that the Doctor is on the same level as Data. We've been kind of sort of convinced through the series that he is. I'm just thinking, do you know how many holograms there are by this point? Hundreds of thousands.
There could be an army of them.
Of course. I mean, it's to the ridiculous point. But, again, the author built on what was already established in the show. So, she was not inventing all this. She was just extracting what has already been established in Voyager. So I was rolling with it.
And the book did say that the strike is supposed to be for the holograms that achieved consciousness, because some holograms are just straight computer programs and nothing more. So the ones that went on strike were the ones who supposedly could think for themselves. And so maybe they shouldn't be treated like slaves, but you kind of, to us, it still seems like the Doctor is a special case. I mean, we know
he totally is. Yes.
He has achieved consciousness. He is his own person. And with the others, it's still a little harder to accept.
And in the Star Trek universe, starting with Next Generation, there has never been true consistency with regards to holograms leaving the holodeck and everything associated with that. So,
they've had Moriarty and Vic Fontaine, some sentient holograms, but it doesn't mean that all of them are. And I don't know if there really could be enough sentient holograms to really rebel and cause so many repercussions on Earth. But it was excellent characterization for the Doctor. When it came to the voice of the Doctor, it was beautiful. It was, yeah, and the way the Doctor said that he didn't really think they should go on strike, but he still did believe that holograms should have rights.
And Jean-Luc Picard gets involved in this book. Deanna Troi, Reginald Barclay. We're seeing the Star Trek universe getting involved. Icheb, he gets accepted into the Academy.
Yes,
that was awesome.
Was in the book too. Yeah, there are so many different characters and scenes in the book.
So we're viewing the story as one big story, part 1 and part 2, and part 2 truly drives a lot of these points home because we're introduced to how they were welcomed home, but the meat of the story happens in the second volume.
Okay, the farther shore. When an unstoppable Borg plague breaks out upon Earth, blame quickly falls on the newly returned crew of the starship Voyager. Did Catherine, Janeway, and the others unknowingly carry this insidious infection back with them? Many in Starfleet think so, and 7 of 9 in particular falls under a cloud of suspicion. Now, with a little help from the starship Enterprise, Admiral Janeway must reunite her crew in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to discover the true source of the contagion and save Earth itself from total assimilation into a voracious new Borg collective. But time is running out. Has Voyager come home only to witness humanity's end?
So that moves us forward with the story.
Now, the thing is, with a duology like this, it's always like the first book is just the setup for the
Correct.
story. The second book is really where the action is and where the story plays out.
Mm-hmm.
So the first book is really what we just talked about. It was just setting up everything. So now we get into more stuff and finding out more about this Borg virus. And I believe they said that it's going to start affecting more people, even though in the beginning it was only children and certain people. And so we do find out that there's a new Borg queen.
This was so wild. I did not see this coming at all.
No, I didn't either. Now, the thing is, some of the other post-Nemesis Star Trek books have had a Borg queen. There was they kind of started out, some of the other post-Nemesis, there was a book called Resistance they were, the other books were building up to a Borg story, and they did have a Borg queen. So I was wondering if this queen was related to that one, but it's not. I think this one, this is a completely different queen, even though later on the Borg start building their own queen again. But this is a separate one that's on Earth. And this one also continues the story of B'Elanna on Boreth, and she goes on her adventure, and that was a pretty good story there.
Pretty disturbing in some parts. There are certain things in here that they could never show on TV at that time.
The nudity for one, but also the violence, you mean?
Oh, just covering herself in blood and ashes.
Yes.
It's just when you think of the Klingon warrior race, this is what they go through with their trials and ceremonies.
Now one thing I always thought Boreth was supposed to be more of an ice planet. This book described it as having a forest with trees and everything. The book Diplomatic Implausibility had it as an ice planet. And on Discovery, I know this was written before Discovery, but Discovery showed it as an ice planet too. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, just throwing that out.
I was wondering about that. I didn't look into the background so much. I'm glad you brought up those cross-references. So
I guess it doesn't have to be the same all over the planet. That just like Earth isn't the same all over. But.
So that's what I was thinking too. Because I used to always think that Vulcan was the hot planet, just rocks and desert. And then we got to see throughout Trek that there is variety.
Yeah, there's more there than you think. Yeah, only seeing a certain small part.
But I love this part, this volume, because it focuses in a lot on the internal dialogue, that the conversations that B'Elanna is having with herself, because she's still struggling with her identity after all these years.
Yes, being Klingon, and also, because she actually does see her father in the first book. So she's wondering if she wants to let her human father back in her life. But, right now in the book, she's searching for her mother and wondering, how Klingon is she? And the other person that was her mother's friend actually questioned B'Elanna, like, are you really Klingon?
Mm-hmm.
So she's doing this test of strength, this going out there, naked without anything to see if she can survive the wilderness and to find her mother.
Excellent characterization there. A good amount of the book is very reminiscent of Star Trek 3. Were you thinking that?
How was that?
When they try to take over Voyager?
Yes, they go on Voyager and try to take it back. Yeah, because
it made me think of Star Trek 3.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Because Starfleet basically had taken over Voyager because the crew they were acclimating with their families again.
And Starfleet took over Voyager, like they were piecing it out because they wanted to check out the new Borg technology.
Yes. But Janeway had a reason to go back because they were trying to figure out all the stuff with the Borg virus. So they went back to Voyager.
And they weren't allowed to, so they had to stage a breakout because 7 of 9 and Icheb were being detained. And this really brought out a lot of human dignity issues, rights issues. They were being mistreated in prison. They need to be regenerated.
Or they don't sleep like
we do. They need to be regenerated through a Borg regeneration system, and they were being denied that. So it was pretty brutal on them.
Yeah, that's another thing we forgot to mention. So the Doctor and Seven and Icheb had been arrested, and they were thrown in prison. They were all in the same cell together. But Seven and Icheb were not allowed to be in a regeneration chamber. And of course, they didn't really know how to make one, but they didn't really want to try either. Mm-hmm. So that was another reason that they went back to Voyager, was so that Seven and Icheb could use their regeneration chambers. And another new character this book adds was the Doctor, was Jim? He was a Trill doctor, and he was Starfleet's doctor while they were in prison. And he was more on the side of the Doctor and the Voyager crew.
He was sympathetic to their plight.
Yes, and so he was willing to help them when they broke them out of prison and took them up to Voyager. And I think he's going to become a part of the crew of Voyager later on.
It's pretty awesome.
Yes. And I think I don't want to give away too much about it.
It's a 20-year-old book.
Yeah, okay. I know, and because we already know what happens, like, in the books later after this, too.
But rereading this, I just think it's exciting. Some books, look, there are some books that we read when we were kids, and we're reading them now as adults, and we're like, wow, this did not stand the test of time. This book definitely does. I mean, it's just well written. I put this up as not only a Voyager books that people who don't normally read books should read. If you're a Star Trek fan, these 2 volumes, they're definite. To me, this is the true final episode of Voyager.
And as you said, it's also crossover because it's got Picard, the Enterprise, and Data.
Oh, and then Data in the second
Data helps
book.
them too, yes.
What a fantastic job Data did. His reasoning skills. Again, you can hear his voice reasoning and debating. He was taking the side with the Doctor, and he was trying to help the Doctor to figure out how he was going to handle the situation that he was in. I think it was a great pairing. It's the pairing that we always want to see as fans, but we never will be able to see on the screen to this extent.
It was great to see them together, and the reason they picked Data, because Janeway asked Picard if she could borrow a member of his crew, and she wanted Data because she knew about the Measure of a Man,
Measure of a Man,
the
sure.
episode, and the and the ruling that came out of that. So she thought Data could help with the EMH about the rights of artificially created beings.
Totally. And I love how the fact that they were able to, even though go their own separate ways, it feels good to see the team back together again.
The Voyager
Of
crew?
course,
yes, yeah. And and also another thing in the book was the one that staged the holographic rebellion, he also created, a holodeck, and he kidnapped a lot of humans, put them on this holographic program, and the holograms in there mistreated the humans, treated them like slaves, so that the humans could see what holograms go through.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, some of that in that scene was terrifying. What happened to the humans?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting to throw that in.
Yeah, it's such a well-written duology. Very much enjoyed reading it. 2 thumbs up.
Very much so. 2 thumbs up. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.